Hello.
Here we are again.
Great to be back. Great to see you all again.
Let me just get your chat up.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
You've got something pretty special for us tonight, I believe. You guys are in for a real treat.
I hope so. We'll see. I feel a little bit jittery. So I feel a bit less relaxed than I did last week, that's for sure.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
You've got this.
Yeah, but as we'll sit here and just give people a moment or two to settle in.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Manish. Thank you for the love. We love you too, my friend. Lovely to have you on board.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for joining in. Yeah. So we're going to be doing this quite similarly to the format that we did last week, where except this time Scott is going to be presenting the concept.
Yeah.
Which he has done quite a bit of deep diving and study into over the how long have you been looking at this idea for now?
Few years.
5, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, so you're quite familiar with it, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. So I suppose before we jump into our first meditation.
Hey Prue, thanks for joining in.
Hi Prue, nice to have you here again. Yeah, this is something with what I'm talking about tonight. I guess this is something that's quite. It's a very important part of what meditation is to me, and it's really it's a really important part of my life in a lot of ways. And so yeah, I'm excited to be able to talk a little bit about it. I feel like even for some of the people who are close to me, some of the family and friends who might watch this, there's some stuff that they probably don't know because don't exactly talk about. Spoiler alert! It's about Buddhism. Just but I don't really talk about a lot of these Buddhist ideas that I spend quite a lot of time engaging with a lot of people that are close. So it's kind of cool. I feel like it's an opportunity for me to speak a little bit more to some of the stuff that I do quietly while I sit at home in my apartment on my cushion, or reading things and listening to talks and stuff.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've got a couple of people on now. Should we jump on into our... Was there anything else you wanted to address before we jump on into our little introductory silent meditation?
I think I'm good. Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Great. I'll just put a quick message in the chat.
Okay. Perfect. And then we'll get started.
Thanks for bearing with us, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
You would think we would have this down super smooth by this point, but
but that's okay. We're here to meditate, so we can sit here quietly for a moment before we sit here quietly,
A couple moments. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, I'll just set the timer then.
Okay, let's do it.
Cool. And we will see you guys in 7 minutes.
Cool.
Clickety clack.
Yeah, nice.
And we're back.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. It's always such a nice way to start this off, actually.
It is.
It is. Really, like, sets the mood.
Yeah. All right. So,
what are you going to be sharing with us tonight, Scott?
what are we talking about? So tonight, as I'm sure a lot of you will have seen, we're talking about the Noble Eightfold Path. And so the Noble Eightfold Path is one of the central and the real core teachings of Buddhism. So it's one of a couple of the ones that are probably right at the center of the entire kind of collection of teachings. And so the Buddhist teachings, the name of them is the Dharma, right? And so I feel like it's worth using. I want to use that. I'm going to use that name because I feel like it has a bit of weight behind it. It certainly does for me. So the Dharma is this really broad collection of teachings that is focused on helping people to live a peaceful and happy life. Really, it's kind of, at least for me, is what I feel is at the core of it. And the Noble Eightfold Path is this path that is the way within which almost everything, that it's all achieved. And so what I want to do tonight is go through this path, right? It has 8 stages, 8 factors, and I'll go through them all, and so there's a fair bit of information that we'll cover. But then to talk a little bit, to try and tie it together, to explain what it means to me and how I feel that it's a really practical and useful sort of like framework and a really useful teaching for us in 2021, even though we're here in 2021 in Australia and it came from a guy in India 2,500 years ago. And so yeah, I think it's something that I've found an incredible amount of meaning and has been so like valuable in my life. So yeah, my goal is to I guess just share it with you guys who have been joining us over the last few weeks and who are here tonight, to maybe share a little bit of that value maybe with you. So
great,
cool. So let's jump into it. The Eightfold Path is split up into 3 sort of sections. Buddhism has lots of numbers. It's full of numbers. We've got lists of everything, numbered lists of everything. But the first of the 3 stages has the first 2 factors of the path. And the first one is right view. And the second one of those is intentional right motivation.
Okay.
So right view is about seeing things. Right view, right understanding. It's about seeing things as they are. And so it's kind of about like a clear understanding of what's happening, right? Not being deluded, not seeing things inaccurately. And
so is that like so do you mean like seeing things for the way that they actually are as opposed to being clouded by your emotions?
Yeah,
or clouded by like your opinions or
exactly
things like that?
Yeah, clouded by all of these different sort of various, slants and angles that we often put on things.
Okay.
And there's a number of different aspects and different sort of like things within it. But there's, I suppose, one in particular that I think kind of needs to be highlighted. And then there's another one maybe I'll talk about a little bit. And so the first one of these is the 4 Noble Truths, as I said, numbered lists.
That's the numbers.
And the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path kind of fold into each other, which you'll see in a moment. So the first of these is this truth of what's called dukkha, right? And dukkha doesn't translate perfectly, but it's usually translated as suffering, right? And you can kind of, and while we're looking tonight really at a surface level of this, so suffering we'll kind of do about stress, agitation, unsatisfactory, dissatisfaction. Yeah, these are all words that give us an idea of what we're talking about, right? So like dissatisfaction and unease exists. Step 1.
It does.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Cool.
I've noticed.
Yeah, no one's going to argue yet.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah, so the second truth is that the origin of dukkha, the origin of this suffering and unease and distress is craving. And so the mind's tendency to crave and want. And
okay.
yeah, so and obviously we can say, well, no, that's not true. When I'm unhappy, it's because someone's being an ass, right? But what it's pointing to, it's saying that when that person behaves that way, our suffering begins when we start wanting it to be different, right? And so it's not that behavior itself that's the suffering. It's at the moment that you start to, and with this, we're not talking about craving exactly. We're talking about craving it to be different. So aversion, right? Pushing away.
Okay.
And so our mind has this tendency to crave or push things away. And so this is our second truth, right? And craving, aversion, and clinging, right? So I want something that I don't have, or I don't want something that I do have, or I have this thing and I want it, but it's going to go and I'm clinging to it and holding tight. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So cool. How are we going? Is that making sense?
Yeah, that's making sense to me. If you guys like have any questions about this, by the way, like chuck them in. I'm keeping an eye on the chat.
Yeah.
So if anything is not making sense or you'd like some elaboration, please feel free.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll probably be asking questions as we go too.
Yeah.
Because this is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. Hopefully we can communicate some of it across. So our third truth is about the cessation, right? The ending of our suffering. And it says that if our mind's tendency to crave and want things to be different, if that ends, then our suffering also ends.
Okay.
Right? And so in that, if we use that example of someone who's yelling and being really angry at us, it's saying, well, if we don't respond with this aversion to that, then we're not suffering when it happens.
Yeah, okay. And like if you have something that you are like clinging to, as soon as you become okay with the idea that it will leave one day, or it may leave, then you don't suffer when it does.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then the fourth noble truth is the path that leads to the ending of our mind's tendency to crave and therefore our suffering, which is the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is the way that the two fold within each other.
Yeah, okay, cool.
And so what does this all mean, right? How is this relevant? Why am I talking about it? The importance of this for me and the value that it's given me in my life is in understanding it as another tool, right? A second tool. Because the basic tool that we usually have is something's bothering me, I need to fix it. And so, someone's yelling at me. I need to get away from them, or I need to hit them over the head, or I need to,
preferably,
I need to make some change in the external world, and to do that is fine, right? For me, I'm not looking to become a monk and to polish my mind completely clear, as some people, choose to try to do. However, if I have this second tool, now it means that when something's bothering me, maybe I can go and change it, and that's great, but maybe I can't. Maybe I've been put in lockdown for 3 months. And so now I have another option, which is I can work on the 8 steps, some of these 8 steps on this path, which is going to reduce my mind's tendency to be dissatisfied with the things that are happening, and then find more contentment and happiness within the current circumstances.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So it sounds like you're kind of like exercising a level of discernment there, with this like following this path and like practicing these principles, if you will, helps you to like kind of discern between things that you can change and things that you can't change. Yeah. And when you do encounter things that you can't change, as we all do, to I guess like accept and work with that in a way that brings a greater sense of like peace and contentment by the sounds of things. Yeah,
exactly. And I think it's something where maybe not obviously, but a part of the Dharma and a part of like the Buddhist ideology is that one can eliminate suffering completely, and that's obviously a choice that some might choose to pursue, but for myself and for anyone who's on this call, most likely we're probably not about to chuck on some robes and spend our lives in a forest, but but we do have things that come up sometimes that we can't change. And so this becomes a tool that is applicable every single time that happens. And it happens all the time. Things bother us that we don't have control over.
Yeah.
We talked about it a few weeks ago when we did a whole talk on acceptance. And this path gives us an amazing tool that's been tested over and over again by people for 2,500 years and shown to work really effectively. So those are the Four Noble Truths, which kind of lays the context, I suppose, of what we're trying to do by enacting all of these 8 steps. And so that's the main part of right view. Another one that's important, which just to touch on briefly, that I feel is relevant for me, is the idea that our consequences have action. Our actions have consequences. Let's flip those back around.
Ooh, that's an interesting concept.
Our actions have consequences, and when we do good deeds and we do things that help people, we have good consequences that come from that. And when we do deeds that are hurtful and cause harm, then bad consequences come from that. And I mean, this is karma, which is something that people have very different views of, and it's often, and within that, I suppose that ideology that comes out of India, it talks there's rebirth, and it's a very deep idea. But for me, on a practical sense, I find that something that I don't have much of a relationship with. But the idea that when I do something nice, I feel good. When I do something, when I hurt somebody, whether it's by accident or if I do it on purpose, I try not to. But if I do, then I feel bad, So I notice consequences. And when I help people, they're nice to me and they often pay favors back. So in a very simple sense, I see that seems, to function, that makes sense to me. And so understanding these 2 principles gives us a grounding in right view, which leads us to our second step in the path.
Okay.
Right? And I promise we'll go a bit quicker through some of them. This talk isn't going to go for 3 hours. So the second step is right motivation or right intention. And so this is, as we cultivate this view, this understanding that we're able to change our mind's tendency to want and crave things, and that our actions have consequences, it makes us motivated to do things, to change this wanting tendency of our mind so that we can move towards a little bit more peacefulness and contentment, and to be less harmful towards others because of the consequences that will come as a result. So that gives us our motivation, which takes us on to the next step.
Before you go into the next one, can I just maybe see if I'm grasping this properly? So on the Eightfold Path, the first category is about right view and right intention, and so that's understanding this I guess adopting this perspective that our actions have consequences, and that ultimately we are responsible for any of the responsible for creating any of the dissatisfaction we experience in our lives to a certain extent. Just by the way that we look at things, or the way that we perceive them. And then with that understanding, with that perspective, we can then approach life in such a way, or we can choose to approach things in such a way that we attempt to remedy that.
Yeah.
We attempt to change that.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say that we're responsible, but I'd say we have you know what I mean? It's that I don't know if that feels quite right to say that we're responsible, but we do have the ability to change it, I think, is the important part of it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, if that makes sense. But
okay.
yes. I think the crux of it is the empowerment that comes of understanding that we have an ability to change the perspective that's there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Cool. Yeah, so almost and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess that sounds regardless of what we're experiencing, there is something we can do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter how horrible that might be.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
Cool. And so those are our first 2, which fall under this category of wisdom. That takes us on to the next 3 steps. The next 3 factors fall under the next category, which is called Shila, which is usually translated as ethics. I often also think of it as behavior, which is right speech, right action, and right livelihood.
Okay.
And basically, this is talking about the way that we speak with people and behave, and the way that we make our living. And it's to say, trying to speak kindly, don't lie to people, be honest, don't speak harshly, don't speak behind people's backs, and speak in a way that isn't going to harm others. And the same in the way that we act and behave, and to act and not to hurt people, and not to steal from them, and not to take advantage of them. And then again, the same in the way that we make our living, to try to make a living in a way that isn't harmful towards others, Again, things like stealing from people or like hurting people. And so this lays a foundation, particularly in light of this idea that our behaviors lead to consequences, to live our life in a way that we behave so that we're not hurting others, which then allows for a little more stability. This is the functional kind of the practical aspect of it, because when I look at it from the perspective of the consequences of our behaviors, that trying to follow these rules allows me to begin to feel a little bit more relaxed and
a
little bit more calm. And I suppose an example is like, if anyone, I'm sure many people here will have told some lies before, maybe just little white lies, maybe some bigger ones.
Don't know what you're talking about, man.
And often when you tell a lie, the mind's pretty busy, It's like, what did I tell to this person, and what did I tell to that person? And there's a lot of work in not getting caught in that web. And so...
Yeah, because we often talk about that, right? Like you weave a web of lies.
Yeah.
If you, that's a phrase that
Yeah.
is like thrown around every now and again.
Yeah.
Like weaving yourself into this web of dishonesty.
Yeah.
And how that creates like snarls and tangles in your life.
Yeah.
After a certain point, and then like you were saying, you've got to like juggle and manage all of those things. Like, oh wait, who did I tell what to? And like you've got to keep track of it all.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you, like, I imagine if you're just telling the truth, that's just not an issue, because you are. It's like, oh yeah, no, like I did that thing or I didn't do that thing.
Yeah.
You're not like making anything up. So you just have the one story.
Exactly.
Which is the life that you're living, as opposed to the life that you're living and the life that, the life that one friend thinks you're living, and the life that the other friend thinks that you're living, and the life that your boss thinks you're living, and like all of these various things.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to keep track of multiple stories.
Exactly. And so, and that's a perfect example. And so by trying to follow these ideas, then it allows for a little bit simpler, right? Maybe simpler is a good word, living. Which then leads us into the third part of the path, which is Samadhi, which is usually translated as concentration, but another translation that I prefer is stillness. And it's about stillness of the mind. And so this kind of starts to make sense of why following the directions towards our behavior makes sense. Because if they allow us to be a little bit more calm and still, then that's going to lead into being able to cultivate this stillness in our mind.
Okay, cool.
And so within this, we have, again, 3 categories. We're flying through this. Look at us. Look at us. Look at us go.
Passionate.
Look at us go. We're going to have to fill time at the end. And so... Number 6 is right effort. And the way that the direction of this, the way that it's phrased is to talk about avoiding and eliminating what's called like unwholesome mental states, and cultivating and maintaining wholesome ones. And like, I think in terms of what does it mean by wholesome and unwholesome, or I almost think of it as desirable and undesirable, which is to kind of say mental states that lead more towards stillness.
Okay.
And ones that lead away from stillness. So again, it's kind of making an effort to stay away from situations maybe that are going to really get us riled up, and make an effort to move towards ones that are going to allow us to be a little bit more calm and relaxed, right? So this is like an effort that we're putting in to doing what we can to start to like cool ourselves down and maintain a little bit of calmness.
Okay, so is this where you'd be like, like I guess like starting to look at like, okay, what behaviors or what situations or what like things seem to like kind of set me off a bit.
Exactly.
And like if I like I don't know if I don't do this thing, does that make me frustrated or upset? In that case, I should probably do more of it, and vice versa. Like, just like do I get like kind of upset with myself if I spend all day in bed watching Netflix when I should be doing something else? Because there's time and place for everything. But like if I'm doing something like that to distract myself, does that make me feel like more like worse? Okay, cool. Well, maybe I should like not do so much of that. Is that what you're
exactly?
About?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about sort of just starting to direct a little bit of effort, towards these things, right? Away from situations and behaviors that make us feel more like feel not so great, and towards ones that make us feel better, and to start to build a little bit more of that stability of mind. And the reason that this is relevant is because it leads us into the next stage, the next factor of the path, which is right mindfulness. Right? Mindfulness, the one that we all know about. And as Jack mentioned when we were talking about earlier, it's like this idea that a lot of people have that mindfulness is like the Western version of meditation.
Yeah, I think that's the way it often is like kind of interpreted as like I guess like Vipassana meditation versus mindfulness meditation.
Yeah.
Eastern versus Western, but that from what you've been telling me is like actually not the case. Mindfulness actually comes from Buddhist tradition, if anything.
Yeah, that's right. So mindfulness is the English translation of sati, which is the word for it in Pali, and that is this entire sort of factor. And so at this stage now, after everything that's come before it, which is all about step by step, right? We kind of started with behaviors on this larger scale and then trying to come closer now to actually cultivating this mindfulness. And cultivating right mindfulness has a lot of aspects to it, and there are a lot of ways to do it. There's kind of these four main categories, which we're not going to go into too much detail, but there's mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind or contemplation of the mind, and then mindfulness of what's called mental objects or phenomena, but it's kind of the mindfulness of the things that are happening within our experience. And this is something that we can cultivate throughout day-to-day life, or as we sit in meditation, right? Just as we've learned. But one of the things that has been really valuable for me about learning a little bit more about the full Buddhist tradition is realizing that there's quite a lot of breadth to the things that we can try to be mindful of. And so we've all learnt to be mindful of the feelings in our bodies and of our breathing. But when you kind of look through there's one discourse in particular that kind of goes through this detailed outline of the different ideas, different things to direct our mindfulness and our awareness towards. And it's a bit more extensive than that. And so there's kind of directing it towards the quality of the mind, right? So like being mindful and being aware of like what's the emotion that's coming up as I'm sitting and meditating. Or there's even a sort of there's some lists that come up of more lists, the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors. So many lists. Maybe it's why I'm drawn to it. I like nice ordered things.
Categories.
Yeah, and so sometimes, and this has been one that's been really valuable to me, that's this idea of becoming mindful of anything that's happening and studying anything that's happening. Sometimes for me, I even think I've seen sati also translated as contemplation by some practitioners, to kind of almost take it away from the idea of just sitting there looking and just trying to look and bring it back, but to really study and to learn about everything that's happening in your moment-to-moment experience. And for me, some of the, in the practical things is to then, when my mind wanders off, instead of going, I need to direct it back, to look at where did it wander, what's it doing, one of these areas of mindfulness is to look at, like, what took me away. Am I daydreaming of some sort of sense pleasure? Am I thinking about food or something like that, or am I worrying about something I have coming up, and to just actually really articulating what it is that's pulling my mind in various different directions.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that. I mean, what's kind of coming to my mind as you're talking about this as well is like just being, well, it's in terms of like, being mindful outside of a meditation practice is, I guess, just like, it sounds like just being present with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, like if you're washing the dishes, like noticing, like, what you're, like, the texture of the thing you're washing and the feel, like the temperature of the water and the the kind of things that you're holding, like plates and forks, and like really like paying attention to them.
Exactly.
And then being aware of like, oh, like when is my mind, like when am I paying attention to this and when am I not paying attention to what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And what am I paying attention to when my attention is elsewhere? Like, am I checking out? Am I even like comfortable doing that? Am I even just comfortable doing a task without like some music playing or a podcast playing or checking my phone every couple of minutes? Like, am I distracted by every ding that goes off? And how does that reflect how busy my mind is?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really just bringing it back and learning to be more present and grounded, and bringing that mind so that it can become a bit more anchored in the present. And by doing it, by really studying, like really learning, like really paying attention, right? Rather than just going, oh, I've got to count my breaths, I've got to watch my breaths because that's going to be good for me. But to actually see what's the most...
There's nothing wrong with counting your breaths.
Yeah, totally fine. However, but like, what's the most interesting thing that's happening in this moment? And engaging with that, rather than being lost in the stories, right? We spend our lives lost in stories, and that almost anything in the moment is a worthwhile sort of object to sort of study, and observe. And there's more details and things. There's definitely a focus sometimes on looking at things and like isolating, like, oh, is that pleasant or is that unpleasant, which starts to bring our mind towards thinking about craving again, because we crave pleasant things and we push away unpleasant things.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's more layers, but for now,
introductory.
Yeah, we have this, quite a breadth of the things that are happening in our moment-to-moment experience that we learn to study and bring our mind towards. And as we do this and we cultivate this mindfulness and this present moment awareness, the mind spends less time in the stories and then starts to anchor a little more into the present moment. And this is when we start to cultivate the 8th factor of the path, which is Samadhi. So right concentration, right? This is what this last whole category is about. Or right stillness. And so then this is when the mind starts to settle. Like in a glass of water with all the particles up and shaking, just settling so everything can sit straight down at the bottom.
Okay.
And so this 8th final factor of the path is kind of, in a sense, the culmination, right? Everything that we've done has led us up to behaving in a way that allows our mind to settle a little, and then actively studying our moment-to-moment experience so that then the mind starts to engage with it more deeply, and then it starts to settle into stillness. And this is kind of almost a natural process that comes up. And looking in the suttas and in the tradition, there's a lot of discussion of very deep states of meditation and a lot of amazing experiences that can happen. But for a lot of us, we're not going to get there, not too easily, not with 15 minutes a day, However, while with 15 minutes a day, we may not enter into the deepest states of meditation and experience deep states of bliss and peacefulness, we will experience little states of meditation and little bits of bliss and little bits of peacefulness. And so the principle is equally true on a smaller scale as it is on the larger scale of someone who wants to sit under a tree for 4 hours a day and really sink into these deep things. And what happens as we sit there and the mind settles is these states start to arise, feelings of happiness, feelings of contentment, feelings of peacefulness. And I hope that some of you have experienced little bits of it, because it takes some time.
I definitely have as well. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah. And it's one where, and I think this is for someone like Jack or myself, we've been at this a little while and have started to, experience some of these. And it's one that I think there's these moments that anyone has with meditation of going from sometimes where it starts out pretty uncomfortable and then you start to settle in a bit. And I think, there'll be many people who've had the beginnings of these experiences where you go a little bit deeper and the mind settles a little bit more and you go, oh wow, this is new. I haven't done this before. This is nice. This is peaceful. This is a bit more content. And that sense of depth, as far as I can tell, continues for a long, long time. And so this is our final factor of the path, right? We're cultivating this stillness of mind. And this stillness of mind comes along with feelings of quite peacefulness and, there's some peacefulness and there's some happiness in there. And so what happens with that, right, as we cultivate this? Why do we want to cultivate it? And I think that this is I think for me, the essence of the path, right? The essence of the Eightfold Path is that as the mind becomes still and it settles, there's these two qualities of mind in particular. Another numbered thing. Everything numbers. So nice and clean. I loved maths in school, for anyone who's wondering.
Really?
Samatha, tranquility, and vipassana, insight. And so as the mind becomes still, it becomes still and settled, and then insight arises. And this is another experience that I'm sure a lot of people have experienced in various different ways, and maybe some have experienced during meditation, where you'll be sitting there or going for a walk, and then you have that kind of eureka moment, that idea, and something comes to mind in a new way, and you see something from a new angle.
I like that a lot, man. That's actually really cool, because it sounds like it's to come back to that analogy you were just using of like allowing like the silt to settle in like in water. Like as you do this, you're like allowing the surface of the water to become tranquil, to become still, so that everything can settle, and then you can see what's actually underneath.
Yeah, that's right.
Insight. You can see all the way through.
Exactly.
To what's at the bottom.
Yeah, and you see that shopping trolley that got thrown in there.
Yeah. Maybe an old petrol drum.
Yeah, that's right. And so as that insight arises, we see things a little bit more clearly, which then loops us back around to the first step, the first stage of the path, right view, right understanding. And we cultivate a little bit clearer understanding of things, and we see them a little bit more as they are, right?
Yeah.
And the kind of warps and things that we put on things, they get a little bit less. And so this is a cycle, right? Where now, as we've found our way to stillness of mind, we've had insight, which has brought we've cultivated a little bit more clarity in the way we see the world. And as we've got that clarity, then that motivates us to change our behavior just a little bit, which then motivates us to continue sitting, and our mind is able to settle a little deeper into stillness, which leads us back around again to clearer view, better behavior, more stillness, clearer view, better behavior, more stillness, and the circle continues.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And this is actually like, I've mentioned this to Scott before, this is actually why Buddhism is like, or the symbol that is often used to represent Buddhism is the 8-spoked wheel, because each spoke of that wheel represents one of the aspects of the Eightfold Path, and the cyclical nature of following it. And so like following this, like it's literally like as you practice these principles, as I'm understanding it anyway, you are greasing the wheels that carry you through life. Yeah. And the ride's becoming a little bit less rough and a little bit less bumpy. As you just like continue to refine and smooth out the cycle of your wheel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that this is one of the things that's so beautiful about the Dharma, and one of the things in the way that it's taught, it's spoken about as saying that the observations that the Buddha made are just true natural observations of the way that reality is, right? He didn't come up with anything new. He just saw it clearly, right, and then put it out there. And this path, it's the process. It's kind of the introspective process, I suppose, is a way that I think of it, of seeing things in a way that leads us to this behaving harmoniously so that we can settle into stillness and allows insight to arise to then go around and around in this loop. And this feedback loop, as it continues, leads us from a lifestyle that's disharmonious and erratic to go on a slight tangent. One of the ways I've heard dukkha, this original word explained, is to say that dukkha means bad originally, and ka has this meaning of the axle hole in a wheel. And so dukkha is a bumpy ride, right? Like a car that's bumping and up and down and erratic and uncomfortable, and we go from that to something that has a smoother ride.
And you kind of comes all the way back.
Yeah.
Comes all the way back in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so this kind of leads us, we're getting towards the end. This leads us to the end of the path. I did notice there was a comment a couple of minutes ago that maybe we'll just check. Is that anything?
Yeah.
Is that a question or anything that needs any addressing?
It is a question, actually. I was waiting for the opportunity.
Oh, perfect. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine, man. That's all good. I got you. Prue's actually asking. Prue's actually said that she would love to hear any recommendations of resources you have on Dharma that you found to be particularly useful. Which is why I was waiting for a moment for that.
Yeah, I've got lots. My favorite, particularly of late, who I've been engaging with a lot of is a teacher called Ajahn Brahm, and he's a monk who is a UK monk who actually lives in Perth, and I found him to be a really good balance of someone who is really relatable. For me, and I think probably would be for a lot of our audience, but also has a really deep understanding of the subject matter. I think he's just turned 70. He's been a practicing monk since he was in his 20s.
Cool. Do you have can you spell the name for me and I'll put it in the live chat?
Absolutely. So Ajahn is spelled Ajahn, and Brahm is Brahm. And I find him as a really good starting point. He is quite unconventional for a Buddhist monk. He cracks a lot of silly gags and he's a bit of a joker, which I think is one of the things that makes him quite enjoyable and easy to engage with. But his knowledge is very deep as well. So I feel like he's quite a good path and quite a good inroads. So he'd probably be my number one recommendation to start, and maybe I'll put a comment up there with a few more names and things like that for others who are interested.
Beautiful. That would be fantastic.
In learning some more. And so I think just to wrap this up. So for tonight we are changing things a little bit.
We sure are.
Our meditation. I'm going to run it.
This guy.
Yeah.
He's going to do our guided meditation tonight.
It'll be a little bit less guided than usual. But I suppose this is one other thought, and this is something I was telling Jack about this before. And it's kind of in my reflections of this is great, right? This path and teaches us a little bit about this process of introspection and insight, and it leads us to a bit more smoothness and a bit more contentment, and that's great, but is it for me? Why would I want to do it, right? And it's something that I've been reflecting on a little bit recently, and it's I suppose this is an important part of maybe my story with some of this, because when I first, and this is about 5 or 6 years ago, went through the kind of first phase where I started meditating a lot. I had quite a lot of friends and family who were quite close to me, and they didn't quite understand, and I don't blame them at all. And I think they were a bit worried, and I also don't blame them at all, because it's probably pretty weird. Why do you go away and sit still for 10 days straight? And you tell us it's really hard, and then you go and keep doing it, and this just seems pretty whack. And so they didn't quite understand. They threw some shade, you know. It's selfish, it's unproductive, it's a waste of time. What are you doing? And again, I understand that. However, I think one of the things that I've realized with it is, especially in the framework and looking at it as we go through this path, I realized that for me, what this is all about, and it's about a few different things. I wonder if I might just hit this just to make sure. I'm not sure if my phone was playing up there. There's a few different things that it achieves, but at the core of it is we all spend our lives running around trying to find happiness, you know? And with this tool, with the Dhamma, and when we start to look at it and say that as well as running around and trying to find happiness outside, we can use this tool to change our mind's tendency to crave and want things to be different, so that happiness starts to come up naturally from within. And there's a lot of different tools and philosophies that are about cultivating this. But this is one that has worked for me, right? And so I think obviously that's why I'm really passionate about it. But the realization, I guess, that I had, and the experience that I've found with it is that as I practice this path, right? As I put these ideas into practice in my life, I have started to have this experience of happiness coming more from inside rather than needing to search for it outside. And in addition to that being wonderful, because it is, and I'm very grateful for it and of myself, I think that one of the changes I notice is that as I find more happiness inside, when I do spend time with my family and my friends and my colleagues, also friends, instead of running around and trying to get them to help me find my happiness out there, I already have it. Certainly more of it than I once did, which allows me to then come to them and say, well, what do we do? How can I help you find your happiness and support them in that? And to take that a step further, and this is, I guess, what these whole talks are a little bit about, is to then, instead of just asking them, well, how do we help you find that happiness out there, to start supporting them, my family, my friends, you guys, to find their own version of happiness in here. Knew I was going to cry on you too with this bit. Anyway, just a little bit. A little bit. And I think that this is what all of this stuff really that we've talked about, is because as anybody, you know, as you find a little bit of peace and happiness inside you, which is what these tools allow us to do, it allows you to help others to then find it in themselves. And I think that's an amazing thing. Anyway, I'm crying on YouTube. Let's meditate.
I love it, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Whew. You're welcome. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, it's I think that I agree. That's like kind of what it's all about, right? That's why we're here, and it's actually it's really interesting that that's where it's kind of like come back to for you. Because I remember we were having a conversation before we even started this.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about how we seem to have both gone through pieces of this part of the journey where we discover these ideas,
mm-hmm.
and as a lot of people do, we learn how to talk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, and we've after a bit of talking, we start to practice it a bit more,
mm-hmm.
and then we learn how to actually walk the walk.
Mm-hmm.
And how, interestingly, as things cycle around, it comes back to being able to talk the talk again.
Mm.
And that's when the doing becomes something that you can share and
mm-hmm.
pass on, and hopefully share the gifts and the insights,
mm-hmm.
And the beauty that you find in these things.
Yeah, that's
with
it.
Others.
That's it. Cool. Amazing. Thanks for that, man.
No worries, man. Thank you. It was absolutely spectacular.
I'm pleased you enjoyed.
And you have a little meditation
Yeah.
in mind for us this evening?
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll set a timer. Let's do 15 minutes.
Okay, cool.
And so we're going to set a timer, and I'll speak a little bit just for the first couple of minutes to just sort of give a few basic instructions, and then we'll sit in quiet for the rest. And so if you all just want to close your eyes down. And as you sit and settle, direct your awareness towards anything that's happening right now in your experience. Maybe it's the feeling of your breathing. Maybe it's the feeling of your butt on the floor or your back on the floor. Whatever's the most interesting. And if you see something that's pleasant, try to just observe it without craving or clinging. And if it's unpleasant, try to just observe it without pushing it away. And then, after some time, maybe only a few seconds, your mind is going to wander off. That's okay. And when you realize that it's wandered off and you have that moment again where you're back in the present, then investigate. You can investigate where it went, or you can just investigate what's happening now and see what takes your interest. And each time, when you realize again, start studying. Study whatever you want happening in your experience and learn. See what you can learn about the moment-to-moment experience of being you. As the time wears on, you may start to notice some more uncomfortable sensations arise. Maybe something a bit painful in the leg or the back, maybe an itch on the face. When that happens, it's time to stop with breath meditation. It's time for itch meditation, Swanee meditation. If that's the thing that's the clearest in your mind. But anything is okay. Anything can be your object. Just be curious and investigate. Terrific.
That was great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, for some of you, that may have been your first 15-minute meditation. So, well done.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Congratulations. We've been here a while, so let's jump off quickly. But thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thanks to everybody who stuck with me through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that some of you found some little bits of value in it, something of benefit.
It was an absolute pleasure, Scott. Thank you for sharing that with us all. That was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm just going to quickly check if we don't have any more questions. But it seems like we are pretty good.
Looks like we're good.
Looks like we're good.
Cool.
So yeah.
Amazing.
Have a fantastic night, guys.
Cool. Thanks so much, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.